A video of me having a go at making vegetable stock cubes. So, or maybe a stock powder, not a powder, because I've already made a vegetable stock powder. How'd it go? It was this. So there you go, I made it a stock powder, which is just carrot stock, but it's a stock powder all the same. But I kind of thought, let's have a go at making a vegetable stock cube or paste. So I've seen people making, well, so one person making some stock cubes, and all they really did was make a vegetable puree and dehydrated it, which that's not stock. That's not stock. So what I thought I'd do is I would make a load of vegetable stock, strain out the vegetables, and then reduce that stock down, and then add some of the vegetables back to it, pureed vegetables back to it, and then we'll kind of get like a thick paste. So like the vegetables will make this thick paste, but it will also have the intensity of all the other vegetables into it. So we'll take possibly, for example, 1/10 of the weight of vegetables from the vegetable stock, and then we'll add all that stock back to that 10% worth of vegetables, and then that will have like a really intense kind of flavour, and we won't get, so when we add water to it, we won't get a vegetable puree, we'll actually get like a proper vegetable stock. But I don't think I'm doing a very good job of explaining, but let's just crack on, I think. So I'm using carrot peelings because that's what I've got some carrot peelings, and it's best off used in a stock rather than in thrown out onto the compost heap. So we're going to go on a 2 kilos of carrots in all. So there's about there will be 2 kilos of carrots when I finish. So I'll add on to the weight of the carrot peelings, and then we've got 2 heads of celery. They're about 500 grams apiece, and then we've got 2 kilos worth of onions. I'm not going to make the stock any more complicated than that. I'm not going to put any leek in. I'm not going to put any herbs in. I'm not going to put any garlic in, because with the herbs and the garlic, if we're reducing something down, it's just going to intensify those flavours, and it might be a little bit too prominent. So I don't want it to be like a garlic stock cube. I don't want it to be a herb stock cube. I want it to be a vegetable stock cube, and they have a tendency to overpower things. I'm not going to use any leek because, what's the reason? Expensive, more expensive than the rest, and we're just having a bit of faff around more than anything. But you could use any of those aromatic vegetables, but not too much. So you could use some celeriac in there instead of celery. We could use some leeks in there. Any of the normal vegetables that you put into a stock. If you wanted a Far East type of background to it, then you would put in some ginger and some garlic as a background kind of flavour. Not too much, but anyway, I just want to make a basic stock. So chop all these up, wash them, no skins in the stock, because we want, personally I think too many skins makes the stock bitter, and I know the skins make a stock bitter because I did make a stock just out of onion skins, and it was extremely bitter. So we're not going to put the skins in. So choppy, bring up to the boil with water, and then simmer for a couple of hours, get all the flavour out, puree it all, and then because I'm not bothered about it being cloudy, so we can agitate it and turn it cloudy by pureeing it and passing it, and then we'll put it through a cloth so it's nice. It's nice and clear, not clear, but it's like a watery stock rather than any kind of puree. But I'm telling you what I'm going to be doing. It's pointless telling you because I'm actually showing you how it is. So choppy into some liquid, bring up to the boil, simmer it for a couple of hours, and then strain it. Right, so vegetable stock is ready. Now we need to puree it and make it nice and fine, because there's going to be fibrous parts in here, certainly from the celery, that haven't broken down, and they will never break down. Fibrous bits which we don't want in the stock cube that we're going to be making. So puree it, push it through a sieve, so we'll get all the fibrous bits out, and then we're left with a pulp. The pulp will then get strained through a cloth, and we're left with a not a clear liquid, but we're left with a liquid stock and a thick puree. That thick puree is going to form the basis of the stock cube once we've reduced the stock. So Do you need to see that? Yes, you probably need to do, don't you? Yes. So I'll puree that. We'll put it through a sieve, and you can see what it looks like. And then we'll put some of that puree through a cloth, and you can see what that looks like. But not all of it, because that would be far too much of a big job. That is the stock when it's pureed down with the vegetables in it. And then this is the stock that we've passed through a sieve to make it finer. So we're left with that pulp underneath. That pulp underneath is now what we are. Where's my spoon? I don't know. Is now what we're going to put through the cloth to extract the juice. Separate the juice from the pulp. So you could just say, well, why don't we just reduce the pulp down? We need running out of things. I can just live there. So you could just say, why don't we just? I did have another jug. Oh, it's in there. Oh no! I need some more things. Hang on. Right. So container, sieve, and then cloth in. So you could just say, why don't we just reduce this down and turn that into a stock cube? Well, when we rehydrated it, it turned back into a pulp, which is not what we want. We want a stock with a little bit of pulp in it. And also, if you're reducing something like that down, it starts to spit and make a real mess. But if we extract the liquid out of it, reduce the liquid, and then we can add pulp back to it, and it would be much easier to reduce it down. So, as you can hear, the stock is now coming through the cloth. It's a little bit too hot to handle, but keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, moving the pulp around in your hand to release as much liquid as possible, and then we're left with the stock in the bottom there and the pulp in there. So I'll do that with the rest of the. That's a lot of stock, is that? Why on earth have I given myself this job to do? But anyway, so carry on doing that. We'll extract the stock away from the pulp, and then we're left with two, and then we'll be able to measure how much pulp we've got as opposed to how much stock we've got. Right, so this is the stock. I've made double the quantities, so I'm only going to use half of this and half of that. That's the pulp that we used, that we squeezed the stock from. So, but there is some of the. That's not all the pulp. Some of the pulp is there, which was the really kind of quite ropey bits that didn't want to go through the sieve. What we want is the pulp to be smooth. So when we make the stock cubes, you don't kind of get bits. Like the silvery skins of the onions type of thing, and like if there was any fibres of the celery, we don't want that in. So that's why we've pushed it through a sieve. I'm only going to use half of that. So there's 6 litres there. There's about 500 grams worth of puree there. So I reckon if we do, I'm going to use half it. So 3 litres of that, 300 grams worth of that. We'll take that down to a fifth of its weight at the moment, so that'll take us down to 600 millilitres if we're using 3 litres of that. That'll take us down to 600 millilitres, and then we'll use so half of that, so like a fifth of that, so it'll be like 60 grams worth of that. What does 60 grams look like? What does 60 grams look like? And then we'll kind of get an idea of what the stock cubes are going to be like. Alright, okay. Right, so that much puree is 60 grams, so maybe a little bit more, but we'll see. I'll reduce it down, and then we'll taste the stock in its reduced state, and then we'll kind of decide how much puree we're going to use to form the stock cube and how much stock is reduced down. Yeah, I'll have a think about that and kind of see what we're going to do, but I'll probably just wing it and then talk about it on camera. Right, so that's that. Reduce that down, well, reduce half of it down, and we'll be back. Right, so I've already reduced the vegetable stock down. Let's take it down further in a clean pan, and then we'll stir in 60 grams worth of the vegetable puree that's been sieved. So that will form like the actual block of stock cube You know, otherwise it's just going to dry to a powder. That's not what I want. I want actually that's some powder that I made. So that's gone to, not a powder, but you know, we could crunch that up and it turn into like powder. But I don't want powder. I want a stock cube. So that's what that stock cube is going to be formed out of. So we'll reduce this down, heat it up, reduce it down, and then as it's starting to get more intensified, then we'll stir in that, and it will thicken up. And then when we get to a kind of consistency where we don't really want to reduce it or cook it anymore, otherwise it'll start to burn, then we'll take it out and we'll put it in a container and let it set. And then, as I'm going to be at work, and the hot cupboard will be on, we'll dehydrate in the hot cupboard at work, because I haven't got a dehydrator. I don't think I need one. If I'm going to be at work and the hot cupboard's on heating up the plates, we can just dehydrate it in there. So we're back when this is reduced. Sufficiently reduced. Let's stir in this puree, heat it up. The puree will thicken it all up, and then we can pour it into a container that's been lined with a little layer of cling film, just so it will, when it cools, it will set into a block, and then we can cut it into squares and dry it out, which will just make it a little bit easier. But we might just have to cook it a little bit longer. I suppose we really should give it a taste, shouldn't we? Let's just try the juice. It's really intense, is that? Really burning my chopping board. So it tastes kind of caramelised actually. But I suppose that's down to the sugars being reduced in it. But we'll see what that tastes like when it's reconstituted. Just, I mean, you know, as always, I'm doing something which is ridiculous, aren't I? I'm taking something that was a stock, reducing it down, drying it out, and then reconstitute it back with water. But I'm just curious about preserving things and maybe making something that's better. And you see people make things. The internet's wonderful for watching people make things and thinking to myself, I don't think that would work. And then thinking, have a go at that myself, you know. You see, if we were just to take the pulp, dehydrate it, if we were to add water to that, we just turn it back into a pulp, which is not what we want. We want the stock. And stocks are thin, you know, with a little bit of body to them, but mostly thin. So, but you get the idea of what I'm doing. I'm just moving it around so it doesn't burn or catch. And the more moisture that we drive off now, the quicker and easier it will dehydrate when we have it in the hot cupboard or dehydrator. It's just a case of how far do I dare dehydrate it? Well, drive off the moisture. And the thicker, the more dehydrated it is now, the firmer it will set up in the container. So it's just a double layer of cling film, which just means it'll be easier to get out rather than chipping it out of. We'll just be able to lift the cling film out of the container rather than it sticking to the side of the container, which I think it will probably do. I'm not a huge fan of disposable plastics, but sometimes we have to use them. But so I think we're nearly there. I'll pause a bit. I'll just take it down further, otherwise you're just going to hear me waffling. Right, I daren't take that down any further. I don't want to burn it. There's been a lot of faffing around making it, so I don't want to ruin it at this stage. So into the container. There'll be some residue in the pan which ooh, sneeze. It's untight. Oh, bless you. There'll be some residue in the pan which I'm going to get out with some, we'll just melt it with some water, and then we'll put that into some gravy for myself. But Right, so see this that, and just push it into the corners, let it go cold, and then we're back when we're at work. How does it taste? It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. It tastes more caramelised than I would have wanted to. But when I made the vegetable stock powder, that went caramelised as well. So probably just something down to the cooking process. Not in there. Waste not, want not. Right. So we're back when we're at. See, it's stuck in my finger. It's like Bonjela. One of the hardest things in the world to do. Well, there's two hard things in the world that are almost impossible. Sticking Bonjela to a ulcer in your mouth and getting a dog to swallow a pill. So, this has been in the hot cupboard for a couple of hours. It's taken a long time to dry out. I think a dehydrator would be a better option. It's starting to dry out around the edges. I couldn't have put it on a tray or anything like that because it was just too soft, and I couldn't cut it up into cubes because it was just too soft. I think potentially would be better off as a powder, so kind of smear it onto a tray, like a thin layer, and then that would dry it a lot quicker, but not to worry, we'll just have to be patient with it. Right, so this has dried out about as much as I think it's going to dry out with the things that I've got, so it'll be fine. Don't know what that was, it'll be fine. Dried it out in the hot cupboard at work, dried it out, turned it over and dried it out in the oven at home for a few hours, 75 degrees, with the fan on. So it's still soft around the outsides. It's a lot firmer now, doing this on top of the cooker, which is probably a bad idea. So 250 millilitres of boiling water, and then we're going to put in, what, 10 grams, something like that? 10 grams is about right. Yeah, because 10 grams is what a stock cube weighs. Right, so 10 grams. We'll give it a melt, we'll give it a taste. We'll see what happens. I've done a similar experiment to this. But we'll just kind of have to see. Oh, okay, it's gone a lot darker, hasn't it? That must be down to the caramelisation of the sugars in the stock. So it certainly wasn't that dark when we started out. So it certainly doesn't taste roast, but it's got a lovely colour to it. I wonder if it's picked up. I don't think it'll have picked up any sweetness. It's always a danger with vegetable stocks that you use, if you make them too concentrated, that too many sugars just get released into the liquid. You don't want, like if you think carrots and onions have got a lot of sugar in them. Potatoes, but in a different kind of way, but there's no kind of flavour to potatoes. Well, some of the rarer varieties of potatoes have got more sugars in them and a different kind of flavour, but you can think sweet potato. So there's beetroot's got a lot of sugar in it, and then there's sugar beet as well, which is what in the UK we make our sugar out of, which it looks like a bit like a turnip, but they actually process it to get the sugar out of it rather than using sugar cane. But anyway, so all those have got a lot of sugar in. So if you make a stock out of those and then concentrate the flavour of that stock by evaporating off liquid, essentially you could make it a little bit too sweet, and that's not what you want. So it's a lovely colour. It's not melting so bad, but it's a lot of faff. That's good, it's out. Needs a bit of salt. Needs a bit of salt. Well, let's just mix it around. So yeah, a lot of the faff. Like unless you've got a dehydrator or a freeze dryer, I wouldn't recommend that you faff around making your own stocks. But it has done that. I mean, even though there was vegetable puree in there to make it to form it like that, it is still really kind of white water and got loads of flavour to it. So I have kind of achieved that rather than just making a dehydrated vegetable puree, which is not what I wanted. That's lovely. That's got a bit of salt in it. Yeah. So a complete faff, unless you've got the proper equipment. A lot of work for what it is, but you know, interesting all the same. I think if you don't do something, you'd never know, and there's not many people. My problem is that the things that I want, the questions that I want to ask, not many people know the answers to. So I have to faff around the kitchen to find out, to answer the questions that I want to ask the questions that I want the answers to. So interesting, and a learning experience, you know, and so to think of everything as a positive. You know, we haven't learned lots, but we've learned what happens if we do something, and knowledge is relatable to something else. So there was somewhere down the line where I might be able to use the knowledge that I've acquired on this somewhere else, or know that doing something a certain way won't work because I've already tried it in a similar experiment already. So from that point of view, that's success. I will add, so I've done 2 experiments that are very similar. So and one was with a roasted vegetable kind of stock rather than just a vegetable stock. What I did do in the other experiment was, instead of, I dehydrated some of the vegetable puree out, but then I made another vegetable puree using onion puree, and I kind of think if I'd have not dehydrated the vegetable paste that I made using the concentrated stock and some of the vegetables, and left it like a paste, I think that would have been more successful. So I think making a paste, so before we dehydrated it, stopping there and putting that paste into a jar, adding some salt to it, not making it too salty, but certainly enough salt to improve the flavour, and then keeping it in jars, smaller jars, and sealing them and preserving them would be a better way of doing it. And then you would have your own concentrated vegetable stock, which you would then be able to open and keep somewhere cool, and it would keep, because there's not that much to go off on it. It's quite stronger flavours tend not to go mouldy, if you know what I mean. Like bacteria doesn't like strong, apart from in cheese, but it likes easy things to eat, you know what I mean, does bacteria. And with food, and a little bit too much sugar concentrated in there. But anyway, so that's what I would do. I'd make it, get it to the paste stage, and then I preserve that paste stage rather than dehydrate it. That's what I would do.